Hello and welcome back everybody to the Foodbuild factory, where today we're going to take a look at the Explorer. That's the guy you can see on screen right now, and as always I'm going to show you some gameplay in the first half of the video, and in the second half of the video we're going to take a look at the perks, mutations, equipment and everything else. So without further ado, let's just get right into the character. What this is going to be about is we are going to play as pretty much a straightforward gladiator, meaning we are using one-handed melee weaponry. And what I wanted to do in this particular video is I wanted to take a bit of a closer look when it comes to like melee buffs and everything. So we're going to take a look at it in just a second, and what I mean by that is we're going to take some food that I just prepared for this video, and well, what I can say is that usually here we have a glowing meat steak, grilled red steak meat, mutant hound chops, they are very beneficial. Mud chops give us a bit of extra endurance, and I think that's going to be fine for now. Let's do some wolf ribs. They only give us perception, but why not? And in addition to that, we're going to sip some water. And yeah, that should be pretty much everything we have to do in order to make this video. And yeah, if you follow my channel for a while, have seen other videos or so, what I often kind of say is that I usually tend to not really use buffs from foods and chems and so on in my video too heavily, for the simple reason that I personally know and that a lot of people don't really like to rely too much on buffs, and I for one am very much within that same category. I typically just don't like to rely on timed things, so to speak. There are exceptions for me, and this is one of them. Like, usually when I decide that I want to do a character that relies on buffs like that, it really has to be something I can easily farm, I can easily get a hold of, and not something like, for example, Formula P, which is relatively easy to farm in masses. It's just relatively time consuming though. And with this build here, that's all not the case. Quite simply, what we're going to do is we're trying to get very good use out of various meat of enemies that you can find in the game, and there are quite a few that are very beneficial to a melee player. To be more precise, stuff like mutant hound chops, for example, they do straight up give you extra melee damage, and then there are others like I think Death Claw Steak, which increases your strength, which in that manner still also does increase your melee damage. And yeah, that's pretty much the whole premise about this build. And so just because there are quite a few enemies that are very easy to find in masses, for example, as I said, mutant hounds, yeah, you can very easily always have enough stuff on you to get decent buffs. Now, one thing to mention here, this is quite a tough fight, but to be honest, nowadays that floaters are back to having high armor, they are actually quite menacing. Now, one thing you can see here is that I'm really struggling because the freezer guys just mess with my damage output, simply because I can't swing my machete as fast, and swing speed is kind of an important thing for this character, but yeah. We're able to tank that stuff, but keep in mind we're not going to run through stim packs at the same rate during the rest of the video. This is pretty much one of the toughest things you can imagine with this character, but still, we made it through, and that's what counts, right? So furthermore, what I wanted to go with this character in a way is I wanted to have that very specific vibe that you can see here, which is less of a battle-hardened badass guy than usual, but more like this, yeah, just explorer. Think about early 20s, early 30s kind of era with Amazon expeditions and so on. And yeah, the reason why is I got this here Executioner's swing speed machete, which does one thing very well, which is making the machete kind of viable. The machete is one of these weapons yeah, I think it's a shame it's relatively weak compared to other melee weapons, because it's just such an iconic weapon for post-apocalyptic games, in my opinion. Not sure why, but something about it makes it just so realistic and such a, I don't know, relatable choice, maybe that's the right word, when it comes to these kind of zombie apocalypse scenarios and so on. And on the other side, I just understand why it can't be too crazy powerful, but overall it's relatively solid. The problem is that yeah, melee nowadays is kind of weak to begin with. You really have to invest a whole lot into it in order to make it work. And while with stuff like, for example, rifles or automatic weapons, you can get away with using the weaker weapons pretty easily, just because they have access to certain stuff like crits and stealth builds and all of that. On paper, you do have access to the same stuff when it comes to melee weapons, but it just doesn't work out that well as with rifles or so, for the simple reason that, yeah, stealth, I try it time and time again, but unless you're really running a very dedicated low health build, so you can get your agility up to like crazy levels of 40 and beyond, yeah, stealth melee just is really bad in this game. And even when it comes to these bloodied builds, another big factor is not just that you're super stealthy, it's also that you can actually kill enemies in one hit usually, which sounds a bit okay, yeah, sure, that makes sense, but it really makes a ton of a difference. Like, you just, no matter how stealthy you are, you can't just stand there and put so much hits into an enemy without being detected when it comes to melee weapons, like compared to ranged weapons. Which, yet again, I understand, it makes sense, but from a gameplay perspective, yeah, it's just a bummer. And then it comes to crits, and while it can actually be pretty viable nowadays, yet again, you really need to have kind of the top weaponry in order to really make use out of that plate of damage, I would say. So yeah, when it comes to using a weaker melee weapon, your only choice is basically to just try to be as tanky as possible, and in addition to that, try to yeah, increase your swing speed. It sounds a bit boring, but yeah, it's as simple as that, to be honest. And I think this build here managed to do that relatively well. Now, obviously, when it comes to enemies like the Scorch Beast we just fought, things can kind of take a while, but on the other side, you do have the time. You don't really have to worry too much about dying, just because, yeah, as long as you can survive the encounter with a bit of health left, yeah, you will regenerate all of it. And in addition to that, we do have a full set of Overeater's armor, which works kind of well with what we're going here in terms of buffing our guy up with food and everything. Anyways, so the only thing we really have to worry about is keeping our thirst under control. But that's also something I never really thought to be too much of a problem, just because purified water is basically a reward for every single event you do, pretty much. So yeah, keeping your thirst under control is one of the simpler tasks in my eyes. Now, one thing I wanted to mention is that we're not under peak performance here, just because, yeah, a few pieces of our armor are broken. I kind of forgot to repair them before the video started. So maybe we'll just do that with some repair kits now. Yeah, let's just take a look. Maybe it's worth it. And when I say a few of my pieces are broken, like, yeah, most of them are. So yeah, let's just repair 3 of them. And we will see that we will be now way tankier. But anyways, I really love that this build made it so I can actually roam around the whole map using nothing but the machete. It's just such a cool weapon, I really like it. Now, one thing you could possibly wonder about is I'm not using the best modification for the machete, in addition to it already being kind of a weak weapon. There's the Sacrificial blade modification, which is basically a yeah, the same thing as Kremva's Tooth, Kremva's Tooth from Fallout 4. And in Fallout 4 that thing was amazing. It was also a mod, technically, a unique mod, but though, and yeah, what it does is it adds some poison damage, and in Fallout 4 that was working relatively great. Was really adding a lot to the weapon, and it also made the weapon more powerful to begin with. When it comes to this game though, first and foremost, it doesn't increase your damage, it just gives you a bit of this poison damage. And yeah, it's poison damage in this game just sucks, to be honest. Let's just see if we have some right away on our quick wheel menu here, and indeed we have kind of a lot of it actually. And now we're going over to Huntersville at that point. So far I think we managed to do relatively well. Really, the starting point was the crazy trouble when we were fighting against a bunch of floaters. But yeah, back to the topic. Yeah, poison damage just kind of doesn't matter anymore, to be honest, just because, yeah, pretty much every high level enemy has loads of poison resistance. And when the game came out, and all of these weapons got added that had poison damage and so on, poison resistance wasn't really such a thing yet. So nowadays it's pretty much useless. Like 3 poison damage over 15 seconds or so relate to maybe 5 damage or something. It's crazy, it does nothing. You will actually see that when you're talking about the Strangleheart power armor. It's basically ruined by this, just because, yeah, the little poison or acid damage, as it's called there, you can do to enemies doesn't matter whatsoever. The moment you're fighting something over level 50, which sooner or later you will have to, you have no choice. Yeah, you can basically forget about poison damage. So yeah, anyways, that's why I decided to go for the rather pleasing modification that I had here, which is just the serrated blade, which fitted my character way better in terms of the visuals. And yeah, in my eyes, we're not missing out on anything really here. Here we have a rare occasion of a glitch dog, and something I haven't really bothered to do too much during the video so far is looting. We already killed quite a lot of mutant hounds, which, yeah, we could have all looted for. Sorry, we killed quite a lot of mutant hounds, which we could all have looted for their mutant hound meat, which we could then cook into mutant hound chops, which would yet again give us certain buffs to our melee damage. And due to our carnivore mutation, those are pretty relevant. Like, we're talking 20 more melee damage each. Same with Yaoguai ribs, for example, and as I said, Deathclaw steak is very beneficial due to the fact that it gives us extra strength. So yeah, I haven't really bothered. Maybe we can cook some up here so we can get yet a little bit more of that benefit. Maybe, yeah, I think we're fine. We will survive this. And extra endurance from a roasted Scorpius heart we will take, of course, as well. So let's see. Here we have roasted Scorpius heart, and somewhere up there, glowing meat steak. I think we already have some one of those, but yeah, might as well. And yeah, just like that. Mud chops, also nice. And yeah, let's keep up our thirst meter as well. And we're back to peak performance here, basically. So yeah, I think you get the point of the build. It's definitely very easy to maintain a lot of these buffs. Now, one thing I have done in order to make it even a little bit easier is I have included Butcher's Bounty, which means every time we do have we do kill an enemy that could spawn meat, we do have a chance to get extra, which is nice, makes it even easier. Now, to be honest, when it comes to stuff like, as I said, glowing enemies for glowing meat steak, or mutant hounds, they are so common that, yeah, Butcher's Bounty basically makes you ignore most of the enemies and not loot them. But it's very nice when it comes to death claws and such, which are definitely easy to farm. There are quite a few fixed spawns. Just in fact, during this video here we saw 2 of them. Now, one we didn't really actually visit, which was just in the beginning of the video when we were going into the cave, or would have been going into the cave. There's a fixed spawn for a Deathclaw. It just sometimes has a hard time to trigger for some reason. And the other one we will encounter in just a second. I pretty much always fight it when I do my videos, and with pretty much always I mean always. Yeah, next one is here. When it comes to Yaug wise, sure, there are some fixed spawns a little bit out of the way. One at the somewhere in Toxic Valley, you know, the place where you can get the black powder rifles and such. That's definitely a good point. Now, crispy squirrel bits from these guys here are also pretty good. They give you like 4 agility if you manage to kill them and roast them, but I didn't really bother with that. Extra agility just gives us a little bit more possibility to power attack, which certainly is nice with this character. So one thing to keep in mind is having a lot of power pieces on this armor makes it so you can basically power attack constantly, which is something I didn't really bother with, to be honest. I'm kind of happy to have a Overeater set of armor at this point, and yeah, I think 2 or 3 pieces, I think it's 2 of them, actually do have extra strength, which is very nice for our character here, but nothing too crazy either. So yeah, really the focus here was just survivability, to be honest. And one thing I haven't really talked about too much here is the effect combination. Now, when it comes to the secondary effect we have, which is faster swing speed, it's very straightforward, to be honest. I would pretty much always pick faster swing speed on a melee weapon as my favorite perk. It's just by far the most efficient thing you can have. Power attack damage is also nice, but I would argue that swing speed always is the better option. And when it comes to a first effect, yeah, I nowadays tend to really like executioners on melee weapons more and more, just because, yeah, it still being multiplicative makes it so effective. And especially on melee weapons, one thing it does great is oftentimes you will just start a fight with an enemy with a power attack just by sprinting into the enemy and hitting it, and at that point you do kind of quite a little bit of extra damage from your power attack, and oftentimes that's enough to bring your enemy beyond 40% health, which otherwise you would maybe need another power attack or 2 smaller attacks to finish off, but due to the executioner's effect you can 2-hit them. Sounds a bit complicated, but it's actually it just works out very well. And one other reason is, yeah, for melee weapons, just due to the fact that they have such low base damage, because yeah, strength, every benefit from strength makes isn't your base damage. So your base damage of the weapon is basically the damage it would do at 1 strength, and that's where all your extra damage from junkies, aristocrats and so on is calculated. So that's why, yeah, those kind of effects really aren't too crazy when it comes to melee weapons. So yeah, executioners, very good pick in my opinion. And while I said in the beginning we're not really too badass, we're kind of a good guy here, yeah, we do look a little bit badass, I guess. And yeah, that was the gameplay part of the video. I hope you enjoyed it, guys, and now we're going to take a look at the details of the build. Starting off with the mutations, or on this occasion I think we could start off just showing off what kind of buffs we do have currently. So you can see that we have extra strength from the Deathclaw Steak, extra melee damage from Glowing Meat Steak, extra carry weight from Grilled Red Steak, yet again more melee damage from Mutant Hound Chops, extra endurance from Mud Chops, and extra perception from Wolf Ribs. I think I forgot to actually eat the Scorched Beast Heart, which would have made us more tanky, but there it is. Yeah, +6 endurance, which is nice. Our special could be interesting here. So the important parts for our special here are endurance and strength, and as you can see with just a few buffs going on, we do have 27 strength and 28 endurance. Now obviously, especially the strength isn't like super out there. There's like guys who run around with 60 strength constantly due to low health builds and so on. But for a full health build, this is quite a solid amount of strength, I would argue. And yeah, back to what we're actually talking about, our mutations here. So we can see here bird bones, which isn't necessarily the most straightforward pick, just because, yeah, it is a debuff to strength. I mean, due to class freak, it's only -1 strength, but it gives us a little bit of extra agility. Now, to be completely honest with you guys, if I were to build this character from scratch, I would probably not bother with bird bones. It sure is nice to have a bit more action points to use for power attacks, but ultimately, yeah, even if it's just -1 strength, I would kind of not use the debuff here, or not accept the debuff for the extra agility if it wasn't already there, and removing specific mutations isn't really a thing in the game. So keep that in mind. While it's not the end of the world, I think it's rather unnecessary, or the benefits not outweigh the negatives, in my opinion. So bird bones, give or take. Carnivore, this is kind of the hard piece of this build. Like, yeah, every buff that comes from meat is twice as effective, and that includes satisfying your hunger and everything. So yeah, keeping your hunger up is super easy with this build. I mean, you don't really have to bother, to be honest. And yeah, so the only thing you have to worry about is keeping your thirst up, and even then, even if you ignore these kind of stats for a while, you're not going to die instantly. It's just a little bit more tankiness for you. Then we do have Chameleon, which is a leftover from another build yet, but on this occasion it just virtually has no downside to it, so you can just ignore it. Then we do have Healing Factor, which I already talked about quite briefly earlier. Just makes it so we just have to survive an encounter and not bother with stim packs in the meantime. We do have Born Survivor, just so as a failsafe during a fight, if we get damaged to under 20% health, we don't really have to look at our HP bar. We're tanky enough that even when we are at 20% health, we still can take quite a beating, so usually our stim packs have way more than enough time to actually heal us back. And yeah, so the negative effect to chem effect is obviously kind of hurting us here, but it's not too bad. We actually have first aid, if I remember correctly, so yeah, that 13% less shouldn't be too much of a problem here. Then we come to Marsupial. This is straightforward here. Better jump height and carry weight is always nice. Carry weight is a very interesting byproduct when it comes to this build. By the way, it's very high, so that's nice for a casual build, I would say. And then we do have Scaly Skin. -12 AP is not the world. It's really not that big of a debuff. It's basically like 1 or 2 less agility at that point, and for that we do get extra resistances, which make us more tanky, which is very nice. Then we do have Speed Demon. Pretty straightforward here. We don't have to reload anything, but just the movement speed is beneficial enough, in my opinion. Now, you do see that hunger and thirst grow faster when moving. This is actually for once a considerable downside, but yeah, while it states that it's plus 50% while moving, I think it should be covered by class freak as well. It's just not really shown here, not really reflected in the text message. So yeah, in all reality, this should probably be like 12.5% or something less. And as I just said, keeping up your hunger and thirst really isn't too much of a problem, in my opinion. Then we do have Talents. This is a leftover from another build yet again. It would help us if we were to use unarmed weapons, but we don't, so all in all it just gives us a debuff to our agility by 1. But yeah, we kind of live with that, as with the others. Removing it just for me to regain it in another video, and maybe in the process remove 5 other mutations, just wasn't necessary here for the benefit of 1 more agility during the video. And lastly, we do have Twisted Muscles. This is one of the more important ones again. This gives us extra melee damage, which is pretty straightforward. Chance to cripple, and gun accuracy is decreased. Now, gun accuracy being decreased is absolutely a non-problem to us. We're not using any guns whatsoever. And lastly, chance to cripple, that's kind of nice. However, I felt like it wasn't good enough to rely on it, so yeah, there's that. That leaves us with our equipment, and here it is, our Executioner's swing speed serrated machete. Lovely thing here. I really was surprised by it, I gotta say. It at first glance it doesn't seem like much, but really fighting with it, I was time and time again I was surprised. It just was working way better than I expected. The serrated blade adds a little bit of bleed damage to the weapon, and in addition to that it just pumps up our damage output from like 120 I think to 150. Keep in mind we are under the influence of buffs here, but yeah, it's around 20 to 30 points of extra damage that you can get from the serrated blade, which is kind of nice, obviously. And yeah, not a lot to say about it. In terms of condition, it holds together pretty good. I do say that we do have our makeshift warrior, so keep that in mind. It's just a convenience thing on this occasion, though. You can definitely run it without worrying about condition too much. Just in case, by the way, because yeah, this is after all a pretty solid melee build. It's just held back a little bit by the choice of using a pretty weak weapon to begin with, which is the machete. Yeah, I also had this thing with me here, an anti-armor swing speed sheep squatch club. It has the bar burning modification, and this thing really shows how powerful a build at that point can be. It really was a lot of fun to work stuff with it every now and then. So yeah, keep in mind you can definitely obviously transform this character into a way more powerful form of itself just by weapon choice. Another weapon to keep in mind here would be something like the plasma cutter, sorry. But anyways, then we come to our armor, which is Overeater's combat armor chest piece. Then we do have an Overeater's robot arm. With this one has extra strength, as I just said, and a left leg, a metal leg with extra strength. Yet again, pretty nice. This one's a bit less good in my opinion, but yeah, it's an Overeater's leather arm with extra luck. And lastly, another leather piece with less explosion damage. This one's broken though, custom fitted, so we don't really consume as much AP while sprinting, which is a thing for this game, by the way. We have this here too. This build, due to the fact that it has high agility and high endurance, uses very little AP sprinting around, which is kind of nice and fits the vibe overall pretty well. And one thing that I really like about this build, this armor set here, is that by sheer accident it just turned out to be pretty good all-rounder when it comes to our resistances. We're pretty even when it comes to damage and energy resistance, as you can see there. And yeah, in terms of visuals, I went with Katie Inkwell's outfit. Another outfit I was tempted by was the Mothman Hunter. Also pretty fitting for the vibe, I guess. But ultimately, yeah, I found Katie Inkwell to be a bit more nerdy, so I went with that. I finally made use out of the Beekeeper head. I think it's rather fitting for this kind of explorer vibe. And lastly, we do have the Professor's Sidekick glasses, which are very nice addition. I really like them. So yeah, and the Deep Cave Hunter backpack skin, I guess it is. Let's just see. Yeah, Deep Cave Hunter. But yeah, that's it. Yeah, one noteworthy mention here, obviously for a melee character, Shielded Secret Service under armor is the way to go here. Extra strength and endurance by 4. That's pretty crazy. That's a very good and considerable buff, which we're going to take, obviously. And with that being said, we're now going to take a look at our perks. And to no one's surprise, probably strength is at base 15, which is kind of nice. I went with rank 2 of all the Gladiator perks, and I did this because Incisor and Martial Artist, those were just straightforward picks. You should always use them. I think I never used a melee build without these two, with the exception of using something like the Mr. Handy Boss Blade, where Martial Artist doesn't do anything good other than reducing the weight of your weapons. So that's the only situation where I wouldn't use Martial Artist. But other than that, pretty much always Martial Artist and Incisor are the most beneficial perks for melee damage. Increasing your armor, your target's armor by 75%. Sorry, ignoring your target's armor by 75%. That's crazy. Extra swing speed, pretty much the best thing you can hope for on a melee weapon. And yeah, the reason why I only went with rank 2 of Gladiator each was so I could use blocker on this occasion, which I think, yeah, the benefit from having blocker on a build where you will always engage very closely with enemies is way higher, in my opinion, than the little bit of extra damage you would get from maxing out these three. So yeah, it's give or take. I mean, obviously a little bit more damage wouldn't hurt, but I think 45% less melee damage incoming is pretty much unbeatable. And yeah, that being said, we're going over to Perception. I already talked about it. Butcher's Bounty, 80% chance to find extra meat from animal corpses. Yeah, works pretty well with what I just said about the character wanting to be buffed up pretty easily with pretty readily available stuff. As I said, really the things I found to be using the most were just Mutant Hound Chops, Yaoguai Ribs, then Deathclaw Steak and Glowing Meat Steak. Those were very abundant in my opinion. I had no trouble whatsoever always keeping a stack of them during my whole time playing this build. And not even that, but I didn't really have to actually hunt out for them. It was just happening that I ran into them by doing my usual stuff, farming some enemies and my farming routes. You get what I'm talking about. Then we go over to Endurance, which is at 15. I really wanted to be this guy to be tanky, so all of my emphasis went on Endurance and Strength with Agility in the back, but we also managed to max that out. And pretty much everything else is more or less a dumpstead. When it comes to Endurance, we have Life Giver for extra HP. Then we do have Solar Power during the day time from 6 AM to 6 PM. We do have 3 extra Strength and Endurance. Very beneficial to a melee build, obviously. It's a timed buff, so oftentimes I don't really bother with it. But on this occasion, yeah, I figured it's a good decision. Now, there's definitely other stuff you could do. I initially planned to use something like Thirst Quencher here, so that I can be more efficient when it comes to quenching my thirst. But I just found that it wasn't necessary at all. I was just, yeah, getting more and more purified water. Usually I just sell it always because I don't really bother with it. But since I was actually using it, I was just not selling it, and it started to stack up pretty easily. So yeah, I went with Solar Powered here. Ghoulish would be another perk that would be pretty beneficial here though. And then we do have Adamantium Skeleton. This is a pretty straightforward pick in my opinion. After all, this is a build where we want to be pretty tanky, and I mean, what's the point of being tanky if not to not bother too much with healing items? And yeah, being tanky and not getting a whole lot of damage, but then having to use a Stimpack anyways to heal a broken limb kind of defeats the purpose. So Adamantium Skeleton, I think I don't really have to explain why that's beneficial to us. Then we do a Fireproof. Pretty similar story here. It's always a good pick. Now, we are definitely tanky enough so that we are unlikely to be one hit killed by or surprise killed by an exploding car or exploding legendary robot, but still yeah, it's one of the more beneficial perks to use. And lastly, we do have Rejuvenated. You gain even better benefits from being fully fed and fully hydrated. Guess what? For a character who's always trying to be fully fed and fully hydrated just so our armor buff is at peak performance, yeah, this is kind of a natural pick, I would say. Extra, even more maximum hit points and even more AP refresh from being well fed and hydrated. Yeah, we'll take that for 2 perk points, I would say. And here's something unusual. Usually in Charisma you will always see either Tenderizer, either Lone Wanderer, or both. On this occasion I really wanted to treat it like the Dumpstead, just because I felt it wasn't too necessary. Now obviously Tenderizer is always a good pick and would definitely have been beneficial to this build here, but ultimately I just felt like I didn't really need more power, as funny as it sounds, wielding a machete. But yeah, the only thing I did here was using Travel Agent, and to be honest, that's just for role-playing purpose here, because after all we are an explorer, we wanna, yeah, have that vibe. And to be honest, if you only have one endurance, one charisma, it's not like you have a ton of options. The only thing that would be nice here, obviously, is strength in numbers. If you run in a team and your teammates are mutated, you get even better benefits from all your melee buffs through eating, and also from twisted muscles. So definitely, if you really want to see or want to get a little bit more damage out of your build, yeah, that's just one perk point that could be very beneficial. And yeah, after all, Travel Agent is, as I said, just here for role-playing purposes. Then we do have Intelligence, which is at 8, pretty in the middle here, pretty mediocre. I use it for Makeshift Warrior, which, yeah, as I just said, is for a convenience here. You can definitely live without it. The weapon doesn't break too fast and is very cheap to repair. I still wanted to have it here. And then we do a First Aid. After all, we do have a little bit of a debuff left to our chem efficiency from the healing factor mutation. And usually, yeah, when I'm going to use a Stimpack is usually just at 20% health due to Born Survivor. I very rarely found myself using Stimpaks manually with this build. The only time during the video I can encounter where I did it was fighting the floaters. Those guys were a really tough start of the video, not gonna lie. But yeah, for the most part, Born Survivor will take a Stimpak for you at 20% health, and First Aid makes it so, yeah, usually we are back to full health, or at least 80% health, meaning that, yeah, we can most likely finish the fight without dying. So yeah, pretty straightforward here. Now I want it to be Intelligence at least moderately high, or mediocre at least, just because after all we're not some dum-dum, but we are a expeditioner. We are kind of a, yeah, kind of a science person, I would say. Anyways, yeah, I think those picks here were pretty straightforward. Then we do have Marathoner. I already said that, yeah, sprint, action points and so on are kind of a function of endurance and agility. Endurance basically decides how much action points are used for sprinting. Agility gives the amount of action points you do have, so having those two stats high means you can sprint for quite a while to begin with. In addition to that, we do have custom fitted on our legs, reducing the amount of action points we use for sprinting even further. And lastly, we do have Marathoner here. Now, to be completely honest, Action Boy would have been probably the more sensible pick here, just so you can use power attacks a little bit more frequently. But I really wanted to double down on, yeah, the sprint speed, sorry, not sprint speed, our sprinting capabilities, just for the sake of it, to be honest. The groundwork was there, as I said, very high endurance and high agility, so I figured I might as well go all in on it. And after all, it still has some combat benefit to us, because yeah, you want to sprint to an enemy in order to close the distance and start off your fight with a power attack. And if you're not really dedicated to it, if you have relatively low endurance and agility, what's going to happen is that most likely you're going to end up with very little action points left after your initial strike, meaning that for at least the near future you're not going to be able to power attack reliably. So yeah, this makes it so even if you're sprinting and sprint to an enemy camp and start off the action, you will not have lost a lot of action points at that point. And yeah, next one here is Through Hiker. Now, to be completely honest with you guys, I felt completely comfortable not using Through Hiker for a long time on this build. Typically, whenever I want to use some food buffs, I do use Through Hiker or the backpack modification, the grossest one, for the simple reason that, yeah, food and water can really stack up pretty quickly in your inventory. They can weigh a lot. The thing is, though, you have a ton of carry weight on this character, so you can definitely live without it. Another thing you can do is, I have the chemist backpack modification, just because I carry a lot of Stimpaks with me, which wouldn't be too necessary on this character. You're tanky enough so that running around with 15 or 20 Stimpaks should for the most part be a safe bet. So you could just, yeah, not use that and use the grossest backpack modification instead. And yeah, there's a ton of useful stuff you can still use, mainly, as I said, Action Boy yet again. But yeah, for the sake of it, I went with Through Hiker here. It's not appearing all that often in my builds anymore, so I figured, yeah, for once, reducing the weight of our food and drink items is not a bad decision. Then we do have Born Survivor. I already talked quite a lot about it. It makes us use a stim pack at 20% health automatically, and yeah, as I said, I explained it pretty well, I guess, previously, why that's a good thing and how we use it in our build here, so not a lot to talk about here. Then we do have White Knight. Yeah, doesn't seem like it just because we started off the video with 4 broken armor pieces, but that's just a detriment to our build basically. Even with barely any armor on, we were pretty tanky. Didn't really help with the floaters though. So yeah, White Knight, pretty straightforward pick here, just so our armor doesn't break too fast, and in addition to that, it makes it cheaper to repair. Didn't really mean anything to us because we were using repair kits on this occasion, but usually, yeah, keeping your armor in good condition here just helps us overall being more tanky, and is always a sensible pick in my opinion when you're not going for a sneak build or a power armor build. And lastly, the big surprise to everyone, Adrenaline. I know you're shocked to see it, but yeah, this is just one of those perks that I pretty much always pick. It's just so beneficial, really. It's just one of the best perks in the game, I think, even nowadays. And yeah, the thing is, for most builds you do have the room for it. You're never going to really suffer from having a few action points and pumping a few points into agility, and oftentimes there's not a lot to take for you other than, yeah, Adrenaline and maybe Action Boy or something. So yeah, this is one of the occasions. So yeah, Adrenaline definitely was a must-have here, and basically is pretty much the only thing we do in order to increase our damage output for once, other than having straight-up damage perks like Gladiator. So yeah, I think if there's a situation where Adrenaline is justified, it's probably this one. And yeah, lastly, we do have Luck, which is yet again pretty low. We do have the bare basics here, Starch Genes, just so we can keep our mutations and not get any new ones. And Class Freak here, to be honest with you guys, I pretty much told it when I was going over the mutations, but yeah, a few of them I would not take usually, and if you manage to just set up your mutations from scratch and don't use bird bones, don't use talents, I would feel completely comfortable not using Class Freak on this occasion. Just because, yeah, the other debuffs are pretty much irrelevant at that point. But lastly, yeah, I felt that at least for Speed Demon, it's probably not a bad decision either way. However, yeah, if you, as I said, don't use Bird Bones and don't use talents on this build, then I would still probably go without Class Freak. I think Hunger and Thirst are still manageable without it, and would rather go a little bit more into tankiness or use Bloody Mass or something like that. But ultimately it won't make too much of a difference either way. I just went with Class Freak here to, yeah, minimize my debuffs basically. And that leaves us with Legendary Perks, and probably just because we were looking at all the perks previously, you already thought that this was the case here. We do have quite a lot of the boring ones that just increase our stats. So to be honest, we do have Strength here. This one is at 15 to begin with, so we just boosted a little further, and obviously this maxed out would be a very good thing on a melee build, and basically my priority, to be honest. Same with Endurance here, also at base 15, and we just pumped it up even further to 17 to give us yet again a little bit more health points. And Luck, Agility and Intelligence we have been using for extra perk points, so that's pretty straightforward. And lastly, we do have Ward Rats, which is always a good pick in my opinion on at least most characters, but especially on melee characters. After all, going into a brawling situation with ghouls and so on, you can really stack up rats rather quickly when you're not using Ward Rats, and having to use both Red Away as well as Stim Packs can be a bit of a timing thing. So yeah, it can be a chance for enemies to overwhelm you. Now usually it's not too big of a deal, but yeah, quad reds makes this a non-issue. And I hope you enjoyed the build, guys. Like, was a bit of a straightforward one, I would say. So nothing too groundbreaking here, but still I really liked how it turned out. And yeah, I hope you enjoyed it as well, and see you next time. Bye.